Welcome everybody to the Catholic Entrepreneurs Guild podcast. My name is Andrew Jacoby from Good Shepherd Staffing, and I'm here with Maura Feaheny of Maura Feaheny and Associates. Maura, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you. I'm humbled by your invite to speak on your show. Thank you.
Well, I look forward to hearing the testimony of what it's like to start businesses, and to do so as a Catholic, and sort of what that's like, and also a mother, I understand. So I'm very curious to hear about your testimony, and we'll start with we'll start with our sponsorship read. Today's podcast is sponsored by my company, Good Shepherd Staffing, which you can find at goodshepherdstaffing.com, and we help Catholics in developing countries find work that enables them to make a local living wage as well as work from home, because in a lot of developing countries people have to leave home to find work, either to a big city or out of the country, which hurts their ability to both form and maintain close relationships with family. So we're trying to help them make a living from home so they can have everything, both work and family. We start off with a 10-hour free trial, so if you've never worked with a remote virtual assistant, it's a good way to get started. We pay those people, so it's not as though they're working for free. We're paying them. And if you like them, you can work with a full-time admin assistant, entry level, for under $1,000 a month. And obviously other positions would be more expensive depending upon their expertise as well as what other skill sets they have. So if you're interested in that, go over to goodshepherdstaffing.com and reach out. We're happy to help you. Okay, sponsorship read over. Maura, again, thank you so much. Could you tell us a little bit about your history, both faith history and entrepreneurial journey history?
Sure. Let me start by saying I went to the University of Illinois for college. I left Michigan, which is where I'm originally from. I'm from the Detroit area. It sort of starts with a faith. It starts with a faith in myself. I tragically lost my brother going into my senior year of high school. He died in a motorcycle accident, tragically, and our family situation, I was one of 6 kids, and now there's 5 of us still living. But it was one of those experiences where I needed to step away from home and do something entirely different, and I had an ambition to become an architect. So I really trusted in God and faith, honestly, and in myself, that I could do this on my own. So I left for college. I had a wonderful experience at the University of Illinois, but it landed me in Chicago for my formidable years of my career. And in fact, up until December of 2020, I was living in the Chicagoland area, and my career was one connection to another. Entrepreneurship has always interested me, but I have always slipped back into full-time jobs. I started my own company, Maura Feaheny Associates, back in 1999, and then I have had some full-time jobs and full-time gigs in between there. What do I do for a living? As I mentioned, I was an architect, but I have done ostensibly owner's rep work and project management work and fiduciary work for real estate investors. I worked in the senior living sector starting about 10 years, going on 11 years ago, actually. 11 years ago this September. Again, another leap of faith. I was in the commercial sector my entire career, working on shopping centers. And 11 years ago, my mother was 8 years into her diagnosis of Alzheimer's. I had 2 young children, and I took a leap of faith, and I closed the doors on my consulting business, and I went to work for a large senior living company in Chicago. My mission there was simply to make sure that the residents and the staff who worked in the senior living industry had the best care / the best treatment / the most hope for a good end-of-life experience, which is what senior living is really centered around. I worked there for 3.5 years, and then I did some consulting for another year, and then one of the people that I worked with in that company actually hired me once again to build his company. In a similar story, I was leading by faith and leading by the hope that our seniors are well taken care of. 2 years ago, I quit that job and I started once again on my own doing consulting work, and I've been very successful doing that the past 2 years. I've worked on multiple different projects and with different clients, but I have decided to pivot, and there's a new opportunity that I'm starting a new company, yet in another, I probably will launch that the first week in October. So yet to be announced what that is, but I'm excited for yet another opportunity that will be outside of the senior living space.
Do you want to reveal anything about the new business, or is it under wraps and you could tell us, but then you'd have to kill us?
No, I won't have to kill you, but I can tell you it's another business that's around helping people. I believe very strongly in helping people along my career. My entire career has been around helping those around me grow in their own career and grow in their own life. And this opportunity that I'm jumping into, it's around construction. It's around what I do for a living, but it's around making sure that everyone along the food chain does really, really well financially. And it's in the residential sector. So it's my first launch into residential versus commercial. So that's about as much as I can say right now until I actually sign the documents and launch and go forward with it. But I'm in the foundation of creating that company right now, which I'm really excited about. And that will be in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where I live now.
Great. Been doing a bunch of interviews with Catholics in Nashville recently. It's been really interesting. They said the music in the churches is amazing. Was the last gentleman that I interviewed, Martin Schroet. He said that the music, because the musicians are so great in the town, that bleeds over obviously into the churches as well. Maura, what is the difference?
If I can interrupt, my
Sure.
son, if I can interrupt, when we first moved to Nashville, my daughter had moved away to college. She's in her third year of college right now. Fourth year. She's a senior, so fourth year of college. My son, the first church service that we went to, it's Holy Family is the name of the parish that we belong to. He came out of that mass and he said there was more God in that church than I've seen in church in the past 10 years. And it was profound to hear it. But everybody was engaging. It was a very different experience than it had been. And again, we're coming off of COVID. We didn't have church in COVID. We were locked down. Even his confirmation was with a priest. It wasn't even with a bishop, because in Chicago they had made strange provisions around the COVID virus. So anyway, yes, what you heard is correct. The music here is amazing. The worship music that they have here, in so much that I'm going to another church. I go to Catholic and I also go to a Christian church to hear their message and to hear their uplifting music, because it's amazing.
Amen. I spoke to earlier today. I was interviewing somebody who goes to your same parish, there in Nashville.
Oh, no
Martin.
kidding.
Yeah, and a fellow parishioner of yours.
Wow, check that out.
Yeah, his name is Martin Schroet, and he goes to your parish, and he'll be on the podcast soon too. So Maura, I have a question, because you have an interesting position where you've been both an entrepreneur as well as worked for other people, had a regular kind of job in your career, going back and forth. How would you characterize the difference between being an entrepreneur and working for someone else?
I'm very accountable to myself, and I believe we always work for someone else. Whether we're working for a company or we're working for a client, as in the services division, which is what I do, I believe we're always working for someone else. The reason I'm starting this new adventure is because I've been doing consulting for so many years, but I find that when I'm with a company and when I'm with a group of people versus doing consulting kind of one-off in my lane, I find that I have a better influence on changing the dynamic. So when I work with a company, I know you found me via LinkedIn. I follow 3 principles when everything I do, and it's not Catholic, it's being a good person. But I do everything by 3 hashtags of be kind, be present, and be committed. And if I am in a meeting, I am going to be kind regardless of the circumstances. I'm going to be present in that meeting, meaning I'm not going to be taking other phone calls. I'm not going to be looking at my laptop computer. And then lastly, I'm going to be committed to the cause. If I'm doing anything, I'm going to be doing it to the best of my ability, not just doing it. And I find that in a lot of companies, people are doing just enough, and they're doing it good enough. They're not doing it well or not doing it good. So that's the one difference. Now, I do believe, and I'm not boasting my own horn, but anyone I've ever worked with, I think, would probably tell you that I really try to influence others to do the same as I'm doing, because I really feel it's life-changing. I feel it's life-changing to be kind to other people, and life-changing to actually be there for the greater effort of whatever we're working on together. So.
That's really beautiful. And what is it, when you say it's life-changing, in what way does it change in life? In what way is it life-changing, and what examples do you have from witnessing that, either in your own life or people that you've sort of worked with on this?
Well, I think life is hard. I think let's not mince words. I think life is really tough. I think the cost of living is expensive. Raising children is difficult in this crazy world, and I think that it comes back to a faith in one another. And I think that everyone needs, everyone, regardless of who they are, I think they need support of people they work with or people they work around. And what kind of experiences? I've worked with many people. I'm not going to say that you have to have a college degree, because I don't believe that. However, I do believe there's certain careers which a college degree is important. And going back over the history of my career, one thing that I've done is influenced people that have worked with/for me. Again, I don't like to use the word for. In a hierarchy, yes, they work for me, but we always work collaboratively, and it's a with, not a for. And I can tell you that I'm very, very pleased and happy and delighted when I see people that I've worked with who have, again, indirectly worked for me, they're subordinates to me, who have gone on and gotten their college degrees, who have gone on and been, moms that are dual career and moms. It excites the heck out of me to see people that are living a full life or a fuller life than they otherwise had accepted. So I think you lead by example, and I've worked my whole career to lead by example. That again, I keep going back to those three words, and again, it's not Catholic per se, but it's Christian. It's every religion. It's being a human being and respecting other people, and also coming to them where they're at. Oftentimes people don't. I heard a great story once about something was going on in someone's personal life, and no one knew that. And people were being really mean to this person that I worked with, and this person was going through traumatic things in their background. But people were assuming that they were in a bad mood or something, but actually they were going through some life changes. Well, I approached it differently. I went behind the scenes. I did the Wizard of Oz. I opened up the curtain on this person and found out what was really driving their behavior versus, a lot of corporations, you ask about corporations, the attitude is we'll write them up, or we'll fire them, or we'll put them on suspension rather than going to where they are and helping them. Because I believe that people wake up in the morning with every best intent, but sometimes they just can't do it for whatever reason.
And in your experience as an entrepreneur, how has your faith, maybe you already answered this, but if there's any other piece that you left out or that you'd want to add, how has your faith informed the choice of work that you do and how you bring yourself to the work? How would you say your faith has influenced this?
I would say it's a framework. I went through Catholic schools all the way through high school, and there was always that framework of Catholicism. I mentioned to you that I'm recently, by recently I mean the last 2 years, I've also been going to this non-denominational Christian church in addition to my Catholic church, because I see so much in God and in Jesus that can be positive on us. And I believe that in a world where so many people are lost, faith is a way to tie people together. It's a way to encourage others, if done right. And again, it can't be done in a penalty box. It has to be done in an encouraging way. I have a great example. My daughter, my daughter, she's, like I mentioned, she's graduating this December, and she had actually moved away from faith and Catholicism back in 7th and 8th grade because the influences around her were telling her that maybe it wasn't a good place to be, and I was dragging her to church, literally dragging her to church with her arms crossed. And I'm happy to say, she's 21 years old and a senior in college, and she is one of the most faith-believing human beings I know. And oftentimes I hear her say things, this happened to me because of God. This is something that I didn't do. I didn't luck out. This wasn't just luck that got me an A on this exam. This was something bigger. And again, I'm using a very poignant example in my personal life. But there's a lot of doctrine pushing young children, actually, in education, away from God and away from church. But we as parents have to stay resilient. I mean, we haven't really talked about, being a parent, but you have to be resilient. And again, there was a point where I let my daughter, probably sophomore year of high school, I didn't make her go to church. My son and I would go, and she would sit back, and she would think about it. And she would go, I used to call her, you've heard it said before in Catholics, a creaster, right? A person who goes at Christmas and Easter. She would dress up and do those masses, but she wouldn't go outside of that. And then I remember one day she said, "Can I go to Mass with you?" I said, "You're always welcome to go to Mass." And by the way, this Christian church that I'm going to, she found it in Nashville. I didn't find it. I was very uncomfortable leaving my Catholic church, very uncomfortable. And it wasn't that I was leaving and closing the door, it was that I was expanding. I can also speak a little bit. I'm an architect, I mentioned earlier, and I'm in real estate, and I love Catholic churches. There's something about the house of God, and I have traveled Europe and the United States, and I have, again, I'll say dragged initially. It wasn't forceful, but it wasn't a choice of a 10-year-old. But if I'm in a church, if I'm in a city, we will go visit a church, and the kids are in tow. And now the kids are photographing churches, and my brothers and sisters are photographing, which is wonderful. Because I think I was taught that this is my parish and this is the only church that I go to outside of when I travel. Then I can go to a different church, but I have to go to my parish church. And I don't believe that. I believe that church is much bigger than the building. Church is a community, and church is people. So.
Yeah, that's I lived in Europe for about 13 years or so, and one of the things that converted me to the Catholic faith, obviously it was God's grace, but it was the beauty of the churches. They were just, I had this belief that if people would create a building that's that beautiful, the ideas that inspired them to do so could not in principle be false. They had to be true.
Correct.
If something was that beautiful. So I was in awe of those buildings.
And I would agree with you. Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, go back to the 1700s, the 1400s, and look at these churches that are built by hand. They were built. We did a pilgrimage in 2023. When I was in college, I went and visited Sagrada Familia. I don't know have you been there in Barcelona?
In Barcelona, sure. I lived there for a little bit. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, so Sagrada Familia has been under construction now for, I want to say it's 110 years. I think it started in 1910 or 1912 or something. Anyway, I saw it in 1985. And I always said, once it reaches substantial completion, I'll be back. So in 2023, we took the kids on a family trip to Europe, and the entire trip was centered around two churches, ironically. It was to check on the status of Holy Name Cathedral in Paris, and it was around Notre Dame, Holy Name, Notre Dame, whatever, Notre Dame, and Sagrada Familia, which is also, it means our Holy Family. I lived in Paris for a year in college, and so I had always said I'll bring the kids back when I have children of my own to see Holy Name. I mean, I keep calling it Holy Name, Notre Dame. Now, they had seen Notre Dame, coincidentally, 4 years previously, or 5 years, it was in 2016, my very first trip to Europe with them was, to Paris to show them Notre Dame. And the amazing thing was when we were standing in the plaza, they had tears in their eyes. Because it's still not rebuilt. So, anyway, it's cool.
Yeah, there's that great line by Churchill. I think it was Churchill. He said, "First we shape our buildings, then they shape us." It's like first we build the building, and then the buildings build us. And I think there's something to that. It's one of the things about Europe that I miss so much is just the architecture, where we have some nice buildings in the United States for sure, but they take it to another level in Europe. The buildings, not just the churches, although obviously the churches, but just generally the architecture there is amazing. And the cities are built
well,
in
it's largely historical, right? It's largely historical. It's around, Barcelona's around the hexagonal intersections, and it opens up the sidewalks and the scale. And again, you have a lot of, I'm an architecture nerd, so I am really into space creation. That's the reason I went into architecture. It's the reason I went into commercial real estate. And ultimately, it's the reason I went into senior living. I believe in senior living, that people that live there, some are by choice, but largely they're not by choice. They're because their families either are not close by. It's a safety issue. They have dementia issues. They have medical needs, etc. But I believe that the environment does shape, as you said, a person, and it's an emotion that you get. Speaking of church, if you're ever in Chicago, last March I finished up a project, the end of March, it was right before the beginning of April, and I grabbed a friend and we did a church tour. We went and saw 8 churches in one day. And the churches are open, sort of. You have to go through the parish offices oftentimes just because of the issues they've had with break-ins, etc. But I saw 8 churches and photographed 8 churches over the course of one day. And they were quick visits. They weren't ceremonial visits. I said a prayer and I lit a candle in every church. But I didn't stay there for an extended period of time. I photographed and moved on because I was on this rampant, I had to leave the next day. So I did see some gorgeous architecture that in my years of living in Chicago, again, I followed the script, living in Chicago and growing up as a Catholic, that my parish was St. Athanasius, and that's where I went. And I didn't move from it. And that's a shame. I think Catholics should explore other parishes and churches. And there's nothing wrong, I've learned, with going left and going to a different church on Sunday or on Saturday night, or even doing 2 services on a weekend, which is what I've been doing lately, the Christian and then the Catholic.
About you mentioned earlier, your children, and you've brought them up multiple times. What would you say that being a parent has taught you about being an entrepreneur, if anything?
About being an entrepreneur, well, the service this weekend at the Christian church was different than the service I went to Assumption Wednesday, Mass on the 15th. But the service at the Christian church this past Sunday, 2 days ago, was all about unconditional love. I don't know if having children taught me this, because I always had something burning in my heart to be an entrepreneur and to lead by example. But I can tell you it probably furthered my passion and my understanding of giving it my all And I think oftentimes, again, we go through the motions. I don't know that we unconditionally give to our jobs or our careers. And I know there's a line in the sand. I've been accused of it, of crossing the line and not separating family and career. But I think the biggest influence having children is I've got two pretty successful or on their way to be successful children that I've, again, led by example. They've watched what I've done and what I've been through, and I openly talk with them. And they're good people, most importantly. And another example, I do bring up my kids because they're my everything. They're my why. And I'll tell you that my son just finished Rush. He's at University of Tennessee. He's a freshman. And like, I have zero tolerance for hazing. Zero. And I told him to speak up against it and be a leader in the fraternity world if he's going to join a fraternity, and be a good person and be a good Christian and be kind to others and be present and he actually brought it up in all of his interviews. And I'm delighted that I could have that kind of an influence. And he was respected for that. He wasn't admonished for that. So I do believe that you can be a good person and still be a good career person. But yeah, having two kids has really taught me unconditional love. I would do anything for the two of them. And vice versa, I think. I think they're fighters for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So what would you say is the hardest thing about being a faithful person in the business world today in 2024?
I have a quick answer about that, and I have a longer answer, but I'm just probably going to keep it to the quick one. I have been criticized openly. I do sign emails, "Have a blessed day." And I have been criticized more than once that work is not the place to bring religion. And I'm not bringing religion. I'm just being positive and saying, "Have a blessed day." So that's probably the most difficult part, is that a lot of companies, a lot of people really believe there's no place for religion in the workplace. And I'm not pushing to be Catholic. I'm not talking to people to go to church. I'm just living an honest life. But and very recent, I can also tell you that a lot of companies have gone very secular. They don't celebrate Easter or Christmas. We know they don't celebrate Christmas. Well, now they're going away from Easter. You're having an Easter egg hunt, and you can't call it an Easter egg hunt. You have to call it I don't know what you call it, a holiday hunt or something. I don't know what you call it. But you can't use the word Easter. And I don't understand why we admonish not only history, but also religion. I don't know what negatives it has. So that's probably my biggest challenge, because I'm not afraid to speak my mind about my beliefs, and I would hope others wouldn't be either. But I don't cut others down on their beliefs either. I don't believe that's right, or judge them.
Yeah, there's the idea of like a private public distinction. So you can be a private Catholic, but anything that's public, so you're not in your business or in your politics or in anything that has to do outside of your home, I guess the idea is that you're not supposed to be a Catholic, which is like impossible. Because if you're a Catholic, you're a Catholic. If you've given your life to Christ and His church, then that's not just doing so at home, that's everywhere. That's sort of the point of the show, is how do we bring it back to the public square? That's really the question, that I'm trying to answer for myself. It's like, what does it look like to be fully Catholic as a business owner? What does that look like?
I think you live it, and I think you live it. Again, I have to say, yes, I identify, or yes, I'm a Catholic, but equally so if you're Jewish or if you're a Protestant or whatever you are. You should never have to hide, in my opinion, have to hide that in a closet. Because none of these are bad ideas and ideals. They all share the commonality, going back to the beginning of what I said about being kind, being present, and being committed. And you do that without ego. You do that without tarnishing somebody next to you. My son, I'll tell you, he was in this, I mentioned this rush. I'm so, again, I feel like I've done my job when I see my kids living that life. And he was at a fraternity and he heard someone, two guys, talking nastily about someone who had just come through the process. A freshman kid coming through the door, and they were openly mocking him. And my son's a freshman, and he corrected them on their behavior. I would hope that we as human beings would live like that and not be, fired from jobs or, again, and he wasn't bringing religion into it necessarily, but he was bringing in what he had been taught at home, that you don't pick on the little guy. That's not right. It's not cool. I mean, if you have to pick on the little guy, what does it say about your ego, right? I mean, we should be there to build others up. And so I don't have a solution. I mean, I think it's one person at a time. I can tell you that my lens tells me it's easier to be a Catholic in Nashville or a Christian than it was in Chicago.
Why is that?
I don't know. I don't know if it's the rhetoric. I mentioned to you my son's confirmation. We drove in a snowstorm, in an ice storm from Nashville. We don't get ice and snow down here very often, but we had a snow, and school had been closed all week. And his confirmation was on a Saturday. And the reason his confirmation was his freshman year in high school was because of soccer and hockey. He missed like a year of catechism, so he had to push it a year, and then it fell into COVID and whatever. But anyway, we were questioned by people in Chicago that we know why we would have bothered, quote unquote, getting him confirmed. And it wasn't my decision. It was my 14-year-old son's decision to continue and do his confirmation sacrament. But we were questioned why we would drive through an ice storm, come to Chicago, and when we got there, it was masked, and the restaurants actually opened that same weekend, that Saturday, so we reserved a table at a restaurant, which we were the only ones there because they opened literally that morning. But yeah, we were questioned by multiple people, non-Catholics, I mentioned, not Catholics, but non-Catholics, why we would have gone through that effort. What does it matter? It doesn't matter. So I don't know, but down here it seems, I mean, I don't know, do we live in the Bible Belt? I suppose maybe I don't know if this is part of it. I don't look at it that way. Again, I've never looked at it that way. When I was in Chicago, I went to church. When I grew up in Michigan, I went to church. When I went to college, I went to church during school. I sponsored somebody, to be confirmed as a college sophomore. I sponsored him because he wanted to become a Catholic as a sophomore in college. But I don't run around preaching about Catholicism or religion. I just lead I lead a life of honest kindness and servant leadership, right? Whether it's at work or with my kids or in my community.
Amen. Thank you, Maura. That's a good example. And I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time today to share some wisdom and some of your experiences and your faith. So thank you so much for taking the time, Maura. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate having this discussion. I really do.
Yeah, it's been really interesting.
Thank you. Thank you on both sides. It's interesting also to to be hearing these questions and have to think through the answers fully unprepared. I like that because
The Holy
I'm
Spirit.
thinking through the answers as I'm giving them.
The Holy Spirit runs the show. So, as a way of closing, Maura, would you be comfortable leading us out in a prayer of your choice?
Sure.
Holy Spirit. Well,
Son,
again,
Holy
thank you.
Spirit.
Thank you, Maura. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew.
And we'll sign off. Thanks.
Thank you.